to the Seahawks, to me, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense because when you weigh that versus what you would get from Dak Prescott, you know you're going to be on the losing end of that when it comes to draft capital. So to me, based on where the Cowboys are at with their salary cap and with their team right now and that core getting a little bit older, it just makes sense to try to stay with Dak Prescott and retain as much draft capital as you possibly can. They need to figure out how to get this deal done. They need to extend Dak beyond 2021, but I think the best option for the Cowboys at quarterback is to stay with Dak.
I'll point out again that Russell Wilson's agent on the record gave a list of teams he'd be interested in trading to Adam Schefter, and one of those is the Dallas Cowboys. Rob Ninkovich, what do you think?
Well, the big question is, Pete Carroll looks like one of the nicest guys and the best head coach of a player's coach, and you can get along with Pete Carroll. You think that if Russell Wilson wasn't happy with Seattle and his ability to help bring in offensive linemen or his input, you think Jerry Jones is going to listen to Russell Wilson on his input, and you think Jerry Jones and Russell Wilson will just have a great marriage together? When you look at the Cowboys in general, it's basically Jerry Jones making all the moves and being the head coach, being the GM, doing everything for that team himself. So I don't know if that would be a great fit for Russell Wilson to go into Dallas and think that it's going to be better than his relationship with Pete Carroll. Because Pete Carroll, I mean, honestly, he looks pretty cool. I know he's the oldest coach in the league, but guess what? He seems like he's a cool guy to hang out with, right?
I'm with that, but here's what I will say. Every time I look up in that box that Jerry Jones sits in, all of his former quarterbacks are sitting in there, right? I mean, he kept Jason Garrett around forever. He played quarterback for the Cowboys. I think Tony Romo was his closest friend in the entire world. Jerry likes the quarterbacks, and I think he might enjoy giving Russell Wilson some say in all this. Field Yates, what do you think?
So I wish that Russell Wilson's preferred destinations, Greeny, weren't the four teams that he picked, because none of them is equipped to make an offer that I think satisfies what Seattle wants. I agree with everything Chris said. Russell Wilson, better than Dak Prescott. The price you got to pay, that's significant. The most that the Cowboys could offer right now in terms of first-round picks, right now, is 3 first-round picks. You are only allowed to trade, at the moment, 2 drafts ahead. So is Seattle really going to take the 10th overall pick in the draft and then 2 picks that would project to be somewhere in the 20s, maybe even the late 20s from Dallas? The answer is probably not. Is he an upgrade? Yes. Is it realistic? Most likely not. And I know that Dak and the contract situation has been an absolute roller coaster for the Cowboys. I do think sometimes, though, Greeny, we lose some of the context about Dak Prescott and how much he's meant to the Cowboys. So having Dak as your long-term answer for Dallas, to me, is not some dramatic consolation prize. I really do believe if there's middle ground to find, the Cowboys are in a good spot going forward.
I don't think so. I don't think Dak has given no indication he's interested in any middle ground. And the beginning, the asking price, the basement, is $38 million because that's what he's getting paid this year. I don't see how they figure this out with Dak. This is much less about Dak to me than it is about the contract. Okay. My list of the things that could, should, and will happen this offseason, let's get for several big names. You know it by now. The Lions trading Matthew Stafford to the Rams for Jared Goff and a package of draft picks. Stafford, the most passing yards and touchdowns for any player without a playoff win in NFL history. They'll be looking to change that. Carson Wentz, meanwhile, a member now of the Colts. They traded draft picks to reunite him with his old coach, Frank Reich, the former offensive coordinator from Philly. Had a bad year last year. Wentz led the league in sacks and interceptions, looking to bounce back. And just last week, J.J. Watt with a new home in Arizona. A 2-year deal after spending 10 seasons with the Texans. The Cardinals' owner, meanwhile, Michael Bidwill, had this to say yesterday about the way this whole thing is about to get nuts.
It's going to be a seismic shift in talent across the NFL. You've got teams that are projected to be well over the cap. We've got teams projected to be well under. You know, I know every free agent or potential free agent out there is thinking, well, they're not going to get released, but, you know, they're going to be a bunch of surprises for people when everybody has to get under the cap and free agency starts. I see a big shift, seismic shift in terms of talent moving around.
Seismic shift. And then we saw this from our Diana Rossini yesterday on Twitter, saying she just texted with an NFL head coach about the upcoming cuts and, quote, it's going to be a massacre next week all around the league. So, again, Diana gets up with us early this morning. What are we, seismic shift, all kinds of changes. What are we expecting to see here over the next week to 10 days?
Yeah, it's obviously going to be huge news over the next few weeks. And we've already started to see teams get rid of some players right now and make those cuts. So here's what we need to know. It's just the fact that the salary cap has been lowered, Greeny. So now teams have got to make really tough decisions on veteran players usually that don't have any guaranteed money left on their contracts. Those are usually the ones that stand out that are going to go first. Now, the difference between what we're seeing this year and in years past, because a lot of NFL fans say, well, we always see a lot of cuts this time of year. Well, now teams that normally would leave guys on their roster because they could eat a little bit of money, maybe $1-2 million extra dollars, they cannot do that. And Greeny, let's not forget, the salary cap hasn't even been set yet. We think it's around 180. We've been hearing it will go up to 185, but we should get that final answer over the next week and a half, right before the start of NFL free agency. But teams right now, they're pulling their purse strings real tight, trying to get those rosters in order.
Free agency begins, in theory, a week from Monday. That's when the legal tampering period begins, and then the new league year starts on that Wednesday. So, Diana, we just saw a bunch of names on the screen. Give me the teams that should be, or we would expect to be, most impacted by this.
Well, let's always go with the obvious way to figure it out. You see who's in the red, who's in trouble in terms of their finances, right? You've got the New Orleans Saints, you've got the Atlanta Falcons. These are guys that are in a lot of trouble. You know, we've been talking about that Russell Wilson potential trade with the New Orleans Saints, and we all say the same thing when you ask us about it, Greeny. We're like, they don't have any money. They can't pay the guy. They really don't. And when I reach out to those teams that I know are in cap trouble, they all say the same thing, which is we are not going to be players in free agency, and next week is going to be a bloodbath when it comes to making cuts, because they got to figure out a way to get those numbers down and pay the guys they really like.
Well, look, I'm not an economist, but when I see negative $69 million, even I can figure out that that's not a good situation. Can I get Yates in this conversation as well? Let me get Field, because Field Yates, as I bring you in on this as well, one person's issue is another person's opportunity, right? There are teams that are poised now, perhaps to have very profitable, I don't mean that literally, but figuratively, off seasons here, taking advantage of this. Field, who do we have our eye on there?
Yeah, no question about it, Greeny. You look at teams like, for example, the Patriots, who are flush with capital this offseason in terms of cap space. This is a team that could have $60+ million in cap space if they do nothing. That number could balloon if they make a couple of cuts on their own. And let me ask you something, Greeny, that's a rhetorical question. Do you think Bill Belichick wants to go 7-9 again next year? Yeah, we know the answer to that question. We'll talk about the quarterback solution the Patriots have to figure out at some point this offseason. But when you've got teams that are effectively sitting out in free agency, you've gone from, let's say, 32 to 24 teams that are actually spending, and the Patriots have a stack of cash. I know this team was down last year, but I expect them to look a lot different by the time we get to the first wave of free agency. Bill Belichick is ready to spend.
Yep, he's got opportunities to do it in the draft and through free agency with the money. Give me one more, Diana. Give me one more team that's in a good spot to perhaps really increase its situation and its roster over the next week and 10 days.
I just like to win points with you. It's the New York Jets. They're in a great position because they got lots of money to spend. So there you go. There's your freebie for the day. I'll get tougher on you in the next hour.
Okay, fair enough. Diana Russini, outstanding. Thank you for kicking off the show with that tweet yesterday that really got it going. And so now let's dive into what we are about to see here, because on the radio show that I do, I have a feature that we call the Green List. And so if we look at the Green List, I put together my